One of the key demands from the Greens in relation to this package is that it won't include any compensation for coal and gas companies. The Greens leader Adam Bandt joined me a short time ago. I began by asking him whether, once he has read the legislation, his party will back the government's bill.
We're yet to see the bill, and the Greens will consider our position when our party room meets on Tuesday afternoon. Look, we have been calling for some time for the big gas and coal corporations to be reined in. They've been taking this country for a ride. Power bills have been going up, and these coal and gas corporations have been profiteering off people's pain and off the back of the war in Ukraine. We've had a clear proposal on the table now for some time: freeze electricity bills for 2 years, give people money to get off expensive and dirty gas by replacing their appliances, for example, gas cookers with electric ones, and fund it all by putting a windfall tax on these coal and gas corporations. The government has now put a different proposal on the table. We've supported the government in the urgent recall of Parliament. They needed our support for that, and we've given it. But there are a number of issues that we're working through now with the government's proposal.
It's hard to imagine the Greens opposing this, though, given it's going to cap prices for gas producers and effectively cap their profits. It's hard to imagine you standing in the way of that, or, in fact, compensation for households.
Well, we're obviously supportive of compensation for households. We've been the first ones to call for that through an electricity bill freeze for 2 years, funded by a windfall tax on these coal and gas corporations. So it's not so much that measure that's problematic. In fact, we say that the government's offering about a third of what a windfall tax would be able to fund. We'd be talking about over $750 compensation for the average household. But there's two other areas that are of concern. One is that the government is talking about compensating coal corporations. There's no case for compensating coal corporations. The public shouldn't be giving money to coal and gas corporations. It should be the other way around. I mean, these greedy corporations are behind this crisis that we're facing. They don't deserve compensation. They should be paying more tax. The second area of concern is that there's nothing in the government's plan to help people and businesses get off expensive and dirty gas. I mean, in 12 months' time, if the situation in Ukraine is not resolved, or even if it is, gas prices are going to be at high levels, and businesses and households will then find themselves facing the pain of further price hikes in 12 months. We need a plan to help people and businesses get off expensive and dirty gas. Otherwise, we're going to be back here in 12 months' time.
My understanding is the bill does not include the compensation for the coal generators. If that's the case, if there is no compensation for any fossil fuel company, it's fair to say you'll back the government's plan.
Well, we've been making our position clear that we wouldn't be supporting measures to compensate coal and gas corporations. If the government has heard that and that's going to be reflected in the legislation, then that is obviously a step forward. But we're yet to see the legislation and what it will actually do. So we'll look at that legislation when we see it. But as is clear, the government is still continuing to talk about compensation for these coal corporations. How they're going to do that, we're not sure. We're getting briefed by the government. We'll have a look at the legislation. Look, as I say, we're prepared to work through these issues in good faith. We did that when it came to electric cars, for example. The government wanted to have a subsidy for some petrol-based vehicles. We wanted it to be tilted more towards electric vehicles. We managed to reach a middle ground on that that included time limiting the subsidy and also getting the government fleet switched over to electric. We're prepared to look at these issues in good faith. But those are issues, the issue of compensation for coal corporations, and also this issue of what are we going to do to ensure that we use any period of price caps to help households and businesses get off expensive and dirty gas so that we're not feeling the hit again in 12 months' time. That's what we'll be spending our time working through.
And I know that preference to get, and your very clear preference over many years to get onto renewables and away from coal and gas. But given there are literally thousands of jobs that will rely on lower gas prices now, will you be encouraged to back that legislation? I know you haven't seen it, so you've said that, but if it is going to support those jobs, surely you'd be inclined to back it.
Look, we're very open to having a good faith discussion with the government about how to deal with this crisis that the coal and gas corporations are driving. But it's got to be one that ensures that these jobs are going to be there in the future. And I make the point that we don't want to be back here in 12 months' time, when any temporary price cap ends, to find that businesses have been given a false sense of security about gas prices, and we haven't had government support for the necessary investment to help businesses get off gas to ensure sustainable employment. For example, a lot of businesses use gas to generate heat or steam, and they've done that, and that could be done by electricity. They've done that because historically gas has been cheap. It's not in the future. We need to use this next 12 months to help businesses transition over to cheaper, clean renewables, switch to electric appliances, help them install batteries, do all of those things so that those jobs can be preserved. It would be terrible if in 12 months' time then we're back in a situation where jobs are on the line because government hasn't helped those businesses make the necessary investment.
Now, just finally, with that proposal that you've been arguing for, a capping of power prices for 2 years, do you accept that would be inflationary at a time when we have the RBA battling inflation?
No, it wouldn't. It'd be the opposite, because what it would do is help people meet the costs of rising power bills, funded by making these big corporations pay their fair share of tax. It would put downward pressure on inflation.
But isn't it expansionary, given people would have more money to spend elsewhere? They'd have more money to spend elsewhere,
no, because it's
driving up inflation.
It's right. Well, two things. One is that it's rising power prices that are, as well as housing prices, that are contributing to inflation at the moment. But secondly, the model that we were putting forward has some similarities to the model the government is proposing, namely take money, we would say, take money off these big coal and gas corporations, give it to retailers so that you could cap power bills. And I've heard the government out there saying that giving money to retailers through the states isn't going to add to inflationary pressures, and we would argue the same.
Greens leader Adam Bandt, I appreciate your time as always, and all the very best for Christmas.
Thanks very much, Kieran. You too.